Hello, everybody. This is Alan Silva back again. Today, I'm gonna. I have this new piece of software here, and so I can put up text and do things like this. So I'm gonna try a little thing I'm doing. So I'm gonna read you this text. Uh,
But for all the living history and the legends still making rent-paying nightclubs and theaters around town, the real story in jazz in 1963 was the new thing, free jazz, introduced by Ornette Coleman in 1959 and codified in 1961 with his album bearing the name. By abandoning chords, the harmonic foundation of Western music, free jazz opened up new avenues for improvisation but also suggested the possibility of chaos. As the decade wore on, the sound and style of free jazz was closely identified with the Black liberation movement, serving as both a metaphor, culture that breaks free of oppressive structure, and, through its sound, a direct expression of pain, anger, and redemption. The music developed alongside movements in other mediums. The cover of Coleman's free jazz featured a detail from a painting by abstract expressionist Jackson Pollock. The splatter of paint, seemingly random but suggesting a deeper form, mirrored the approach of the musicians. It was the art of the accelerated moment, reflecting the hum and technological bent of the modern American city, and New York was its cradle. The jazz mainstream, however, was at this point still highly skeptical.
well, I'm going to develop this idea here. Fundamentally, Albert Ayler. This is coming from an article about Albert Ayler's life while he was in New York City by, let me see if I can get you the name of this guy. That's, here we are. It's going to give you that. New York is killing me. Albert Ayler's life and death in the jazz capital. So, in a sense, this is on pitchfork.com. And so I just picked this out of someone put that up on my posts. And so I went to this site and I saw that. Well, normally I've been redoing a lot of work on what sites are saying about this particular period. And number one, I get a lot of what I call things that I wouldn't agree with fundamentally. And I have never expressed that because no one wants to talk to Alan Silva about what was the 60s about and what we were doing in New York City. I mean, very few journalists would come to me and say, well, what was Jazz Composers Guild like in 1962, 1963? You understand? What was the conditions of that music? Well, we were quite young musicians at this time. You know, half of my generation was just about 18 or 19 or 20. The previous generation was already Donald Byrd and a whole bunch of people had developed a very sophisticated type of music in New York City. I'm from New York City, and I was raised in New York City, and I saw all the great musicians that you could possibly ever believe. I mean, at 5 or 6 years old, I was seeing Duke Ellington, Count Basie, everybody in a sense, Nat King Cole, everything. So by we're talking about the New York scene, New York was a mega process of 8 million people, you know, and we have New York musicians, you know, like Thelonious Monk and Sonny Rollins, Max Roach. These are New York musicians. A lot of musicians that come to New York, like Charlie Parker, are outside coming from Kansas City. So our cultural New York as a cultural melting pot of different Americans coming there to try to make it. That's what they all came here for. But us guys living in New York City, like myself, as a New Yorker, like Cecil Taylor's a New Yorker, Ann Cyril is a New Yorker, Jimmy Lyons is a New Yorker, you know. I mean, Henry Grimes comes from Philly. I mean, so, you know, so guys like that when I gotta read a story like this, it's out of the context of it's like trying to look at New York City from a different perspective. This is Alan Silver's perspective of New York City at the time. I mean, I studied with Donald Byrd, and I studied with Charles Mingus, and I studied with musicology at Columbia University with one of the finest American musicologists. Consequently, Alan Lomax. Theoretical problems in music. I mean, Americans have produced some theoretical documents. If this guy says that, is that George Russell, who created Lydian chromatic concept of music. He's the first American theoretician to establish what improvisation was about. So consequently, that's George Russell, and he had a certain impact upon all of our thinking at this time. If you're involved in becoming an improviser, you understand. So my perspective on this particular text is just all out of context. It's trying to establish the fact that it's kind of like more or less a leftist point of view about American enterprise, free enterprise system. And I kind of was in the middle of here. I'm an independently ideologically. You understand? I had no ideology at all. I'm just an American. You know, I believe in the Constitution of the United States, and I ain't got no other ideology but the Republic of the country. So fundamentally, I don't have any exterior. So I'm looking at this guy like, where is he coming from? That's not a guy who actually was there. Where did he get these documents that we were against Western music? That's like stupid. I mean, every American goes to a music school, man. I mean, Charlie Parker went to music school, Dizzy Gillespie went to music school, you understand? Or you studied music. Even Arnett had to study music because he couldn't play his horn without studying it. So consequently, all this political stuff about whether or not improvisation should be openly free or openly what? Improvisation is a form, an art form that creative people in the United States seem to have gravitated toward to produce their music. I mean, Louis Armstrong, all the way back to the relationship between composers and improvisers, such as the relationship between Jelly Roll Morton and other musicians who improvised on his music, all the way up to Duke Ellington, all the way up to Sun Ra. It's about these generations of musicians who decide they'd like to hang out with this composer over here. He's doing some interesting stuff. So I don't particularly, I'm a more or less a Duke Ellington point of view about American music. The orchestra is one of the most fantastic creations by Western music, was the ability to put 100 people on the bandstand. I mean, that's a great achievement. And when you attack Western music for that, we playing Western instruments. What are you talking about? We're playing the trumpet, the saxophone, the bass, the piano. All these are westernized instruments that these brothers have developed. They've taken the bass and they made it like, didn't sound like a European bass player. It sounded like an American bass player, like a piano players. Piano players sound individual. They don't sound like the composer. So all these things people, put into, I'm not a music educator, you see. So I have to teach my students how to be objective about listening to someone who's an American. That was my point of view. When I studied music education, well, we need to justify that Charlie Parker's an American improviser. That's what we do. Whether it's jazz or written music, the whole thing that happened in America was this relationship between composer and musician. So these contexts that this guy is writing and the relationship between our music have a history that goes back to the beginning of the century. So all these social movements that jazz has been affected by. I mean, improvised music or musicians are affected by what the federal government decides what it is. Now, in 1893, the federal government decided that it had to separate the European Americans from the colored people. That was like one of the people none of these historians who write about music in America never understand from 1893 until 1960, basically you had black and white America. I mean, don't say it's a struggle. That was exactly what the federal government laid out. This is a federal law, you know. So we can build racist theories out of that. We can build, no integration and so forth. So those issues, I think that people don't address when they write something like Black liberation movements. Well, no, everybody in America needed to be liberated from this law that divided the Americans from the European Americans. They decided that. I mean, anybody who's a European American who decides, they're white and the other one is black, that's not American. That's un-American, basically, from my point of view. So from my point of view, when I got 18 or 19, I needed to change that. That was the social role I had as an American. That was the only thing I had wrong with America. This is wrong. This is absolutely out of way. I can't defend this. You understand? So my country is asking me to defend. I defend the home front. The home front is this. And so Martin Luther King and the civil rights, NAACP has been fighting this law for almost 60 years. So I joined the NAACP, the civil rights organization that's sponsored to try to break that down. Now, a lot of European Americans didn't join that organization, or they had no protest movement against that. It was because there was an advantage for them. You know what I'm saying? These European Americans took advantage of the law. So they put some barriers up, and so forth. We needed to break those barriers because they're un-American. Communism was un-American anyway. So number one, we needed to get rid of that. And everybody had the same play field. You understand? So cats want to, make written music. They can make written music as well as make improvised music. All music in America is democratic. If a guy wants to, play that, that's what it is. We are all in the music business to give the American people a variety of music. I didn't like the corporate America trying to make one type of music. That was really not correct. You understand? You should not push that. Push a lot of guitar players in front of a television set, and then you lose violin players, all kinds of musicians. You have to give a united front to the music business to have. Now we got stuck with 500 guitar playing bands. I mean, that's not as great as the 30s when you guys were playing 13 guys playing saxophones. You saying that that's an advancement? No, that's not an advancement. That is a failure of your music education system to do this right. You understand? And I'm a guy that in the 60s, I needed to correct that. So I created the Freeform Improvisation Ensemble, which was about this concept called improvisation. What is improvisation? Is it composer generated or is it musician generated? I decided that the instrumentalist was an improviser and he was an artist, not a musician. That's absolutely different because when you're an artist, you're expressing yourself. So consequently, all these musicians, all these so-called band leaders, they're just on the top of this thing. But actually, the musicians are the whole key to the whole music business. So that's why I don't like particularly a singer getting more money than the music. Even Duke Ellington didn't do that, man. I mean, wow. What are you European guys doing here with this business, which is a broad-based business? So getting back to this little guy's article here, whether or not where civil rights was one of the big issues of the 60s that very few writers want to come to grips with. Is the fact that a lot of musicians in the United States don't even want to come to grips with. You understand? That they had from 19 a very good year to develop their television skills, their radio skills, while other people didn't develop those skills. You understand? To be able to be on radio, be on TV, because that was the block. Go on movies. I mean, why should you have to think about one direction in performance? Maybe you can write some music for film. Maybe you can write some music for, maybe you can improvise some music to this. I just opened the whole scope up, you know. So that's what the 60s were for me. So I'm going to cut this right here.